You have a lot of options on where you can go for fish and chips. Let me help you decide on where to spend your money.
I've been to Bonavista a bunch of times, but I just had my first ever fish and chips here, and I found I'm pretty confident in saying the right place to do it. It's PK's. You know, in a town like Bonavista with a lot of really nice fancy restaurants, this place is doing just fine with their basic signage, their basic storefront, but they make a good fish and chips, I promise you that.
In Conception Bay, two places that are relatively close to each other, separated by the water, and you need to take a ferry to get to one of them. By the beach in Portugal Cove St. Phillips, and Dick's is on Bell Island. Portugal Cove St. Phillips is where the Bell Island ferry is. I would say that the ferry ride is worth it just for a little excursion. The ferry's only, 15, 20 minutes if you're on the Legionnaire, the bigger, newer ferry, and the older ferry, the Beaumont Hamel. It was only like 25 minutes, so it's not a big haul to get over there. Drive on, and I went with my dad. We drove on 2 passengers. It was $13 or $14. There's no real expense that you have to account for. The restaurant is actually pretty well. As soon as you get off the ferry, it's right there, almost in the ferry parking lot, like where we line up for the ferry. It's really easy to get to. By the beach has always been one of my favorites. When you get there, the surroundings are beautiful. The restaurant itself is pretty small. The seating area is small, but it's nice inside. It's cozy. The service is top notch. It's always so friendly. The people that take care of us every single time are always just happy to have us there. It really feels like that. The actual fish is delicious. Every aspect of the restaurant is just top notch. So this is actually a third place that's right in the same region. So By the Beach is still my standout, and I'm going to say that forever, I'm sure. But just up the road from there, actually at the Bell Island ferry terminal, there is a little place called Landings. It's kind of like a pub. It's not just for fish and chips, but the fish and chips there is fantastic. It's basically, a 10-minute drive from the airport if you're in the East End. It's a pretty big place. Lots of windows, and you can see the ferry terminal and some other boats. It's on the water, so it's a beautiful little spot. But the fish and chips there was as good as anywhere else that I've been. The piece of fish, I remember being super thick and just really tasty batter on it. The dressing and gravy, of course, was great.
That's Landings. It's like right at basically the apron for the Bell Island ferry. I didn't even know this place was around until recently. Everybody thinks about By the Beach and over on the other side, Dick's is. And Landings is just right here, right? Basically, you turn, when you're coming down, you turn left instead of going straight onto the boat.
Legs, motel and restaurant. The restaurant itself was a little bit surprising how busy it was when I went in. I went on a Tuesday at like 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m., and the place was half full still. One of the gentleman that was actually eating, we left kind of at the same time. He mentioned to me that he drove out from Carbonaire, which is close but not that close. It still takes a 20-minute drive to get to Heart's Content from Carbonaire, and he said he goes there for their burgers and the service. He just really likes the place. So take that for what it's worth. There's lots of places to eat in Carbonaire, and this gentleman made the effort to get to Legs specifically for their burgers and for their service. In the town of Brigus, there is a place that's kind of growing in profile called the Riseover. Now, the Riseover is a pub. It's not, a fish and chips snack bar. It's a really nice, thoughtful pub with really well-planned decor and a menu that is pretty impressive, to be honest. The thing that stood out for the Riseover that made it very different from any of the other places that I went to was that the batter at the Riseover in Brigus was a bear batter, which, in my opinion, I believe people from outside of Newfoundland who are used to fish and chips in a pub, say, they will probably be expecting this type of batter. It's a little thicker, there's definitely a little bit of a different flavor to it, and it was excellent at the Riseover. It was just different. So it stood out when compared to the other batters that I had for the most part. Even though it's a fairly out of the way road trip for you. It's definitely worth the trip to get to Harbor Breton for a lot of reasons. But the place that I found a great fish and chips in Harbor Breton was a place called Ernie's. And any place that's going to be called Ernie's, you know it's going to be quality. You know, simple benches on the inside. You order at a counter. The menu's on a chalkboard behind you. Nothing fancy about the place, but it was really clean and just really inviting. The service was really good. It was counter service, but the young man that served me at the counter brought the food out and made sure I had everything I needed and all that. The fish was great. The chips were great. There's a lot of people coming in, locals coming in for their own supper that night, so that tells you a lot as well. If the locals are coming in, it's probably going to be a pretty good place. But like I said, the place is called Ernie's. You can't go wrong with a place called Ernie's. Now, I didn't get to spend too much time in Conn River, but there's a lot that goes on there in the summertime. They have the famous powwow that I definitely want to get back and experience. But while I was there, I definitely made a point to try Loppy's Landing. Talked about Ernie's and Harbor Breton a moment ago, and just the name itself is worth going in. You gotta stop into a place called Ernie's. A place called Loppy's Landing, I'll say the same exact thing. You can't miss out if you're gonna be in that area. And of course I got the fish and chips because that's what I do when I'm traveling around Newfoundland. I try to get fish and chips wherever I am. And this was another, delicious plate. Everything about the fish and chips there was really good. The service was great, the food was great. The sun popped out from behind the clouds for the first time at that point for a couple of days. I didn't see any sun, so it was really nice. Felt like I was in the right place at the right time, and I highly recommend everybody to visit Conn River anyway, but if you're there, try Loppy's Landing for delicious fish and chips. In Lassie, there was Critch's Snack Bar, and on Fogo Island, the Cod Jigger. And both of these places, at Critch's in Lassie, they specified that their specialty was their fried chicken. And at the Cod Jigger in Fogo Island, they also offered fried chicken that seemed to be pretty popular as well. And I'm pretty sure that they used some of the chicken seasoning in their fish batter, which was refreshing. It was different. The texture was slightly different, and there's a little, pepper and nothing spicy, but there was some kick to the seasoning that was in the batter for both of these places. So in Fogo Island and in Lassie, it stood out a little bit as well. We're in Lassie right now. It's a little windy. Hopefully it doesn't sound too bad on the microphone here, but beautiful town. We found a nice place for a bite to eat here called Critch's. I'm trying another fish and chips, of course, and I'm kind of excited to try it out. Really friendly service, I'll say, to start. And this is a long trip up from the Trans-Canada Highway, but so far, even with this weather, I gotta say it's absolutely worth it. It's completely blown my mind just how beautiful this town is. Most people think of Newfoundland as like a very unique province. Fogo Island is just the same way. It stands alone. There's nothing like it. By singling out a couple of restaurants whose batter stood out, that's not to take anything away from Rosie's and Gander, from Badger Diner and Grand Falls, from any of the places that I went to. I have nothing bad to say about the batter, and in fact it's the batter that I look forward to when I go to a fish and chips restaurant. But it's worth highlighting the different offerings that some of these places provided. I didn't really want to make this video a competition just because I just kind of approaching it from a different angle. I was investigating these places and learning about the different dishes that they had. I didn't want to pit Rosie's and Gander against Badger Diner and Grand Falls because there's enough of a rivalry between Gander and Grand Falls in a lot of other ways. So it wasn't about competition, it was just about showcasing. Gander and Grand Falls are not tiny towns. You have enough of a community there that I don't think I'm educating anybody in Gander about this place called Rosie's. It seems to me like it's very well known. But if you're passing through or if you're heading that way for a visit, now you know where you can stop in for a great fish and chips or even an amazing looking Jig's dinner, which reported by my dad was very, very good. Badger Diner is actually in the town of Grand Falls now. It used to be in the town of Badger, where it got its name, and it burned down in a fire a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But they reopened here, big spot. Good fish and chips. They say they're the best in Newfoundland and Labrador. We'll find out. Captain's Table in Mobile is on the southern shore, just a little south of Bay Bulls, Witless Bay, then there's Mobile. Starting from Mount Pearl, it was about a 25-minute drive, so kind of like when I say by the beach, it's a bit of an excursion. It takes a bit of effort to get there, but it's nothing overwhelming. For something like a date night, I would strongly recommend the Captain's Table. Of course, I got the fish and chips there, but this was another one of those pretty large menus. They have all kinds of different options, so if fish and chips isn't your thing, you could still try the restaurant just for the experience. They claim to have the world's best fish and chips, and they have a few different awards from local voting campaigns, different sources that I noticed, so it's backed up at least within certain communities. Saying you have the best fish and chips in the world is a bold statement. I definitely liked it. Is it the best in the world? Could be. But the restaurant is just sort of decorated very nicely. And it's always nice to travel down Southern Shore, even if you're just going Bay Bulls, Witless Bay, you're not going deep into the Irish Loop. Going over the rolling hills on the coastal drive is fantastic. So highly recommended to try the Captain's Table in Mobile for the delicious food, but also for the experience of eating at that restaurant. They really took a lot of care to make that place look really good on the inside. Service was fantastic, and it was delicious. Just something to say about rods in Clarenville specifically here. In the summer of 2022, we went on a road trip to the Burin Peninsula and the Bonavista Peninsula. So on the way out, we stopped at Rods in Clarenville. I gotta say that even then I remember the fish and chips being fantastic, but the service in summer of 2022 was comically bad. And not bad like rude or anything, just like the people that were working did not want to be there. The friendliness aspect that Newfoundlanders are supposed to be known for just was not there. The people that were working that day did not want to be there. And I don't want to judge because I don't know what was going on in their lives at that moment. I'm not knocking it like that was the experience, and it was almost charming because it was so surly, but it's worth mentioning. So when we went back to Rods on this trip, I'm very happy to say that the service was 180 degrees different. But that's Rods in 2022, complete different staff in Halloween 2023. Oh, the fish and chips was fantastic still as well. It was, I got a snack size, which was hands down the biggest portion of fish and chips I got. So I can't imagine what the actual full size, like the dinner plate would look like. Mount Pearl and Paradise and CBS. These are places that if you are living in CBS or Paradise or Mount Pearl, it's not too difficult of a stretch to think like you can get in your car and go to Chess's or Leo's or any of the other St. John's kind of famous fish and chips restaurants. But in a community like Paradise, to have a craving for a good fish and chips dressing and gravy and just head down the road a little bit, having places like this close by is really important. Sometimes you just have a craving for good quality fish and chips, dressing and gravy, and you don't want to get in your car and drive down a freshwater road or make a journey out of it. You just want it to be simple. So having these places in Paradise, Mount Pearl, CBS, it's awesome. Is what you're ordering quality? Is it actually good? Absolutely. All three of these places, King Cod, Codfather, Denver's, they're excellent. So I mentioned, King Cod and the Codfather in Mount Pearl and Paradise respectively. They're great options for somebody who is in the west end of the city and you're craving a fish and chips and you don't feel like heading down a freshwater road. Or now you have options in these suburban communities of St. John's where you can get a quality plate of fish and chips. Denver's and CBS has been around for a lot longer than either one of these two places, but it's kind of the same thing. It's your community fish and chips joint. They have a lot of other things available. It's not a fish and chips centric restaurant, but they definitely have a good fish and chips. I'll state that unequivocally here. Equivocally? I think that's the word. It was good. I went to King Cod. This is literally like 3 minutes from my house. In Mount Pearl, we have a Chess's franchise or location, whatever you want to call it. We have other places where you can get fish and chips on the menu, but I picked King Cod because it is obviously a fish and chips first type of restaurant. So I wanted to pay these guys a visit specifically, and they didn't disappoint. And kind of like I mentioned when I was talking about the Codfather in Paradise, like we're not far from Fish and Chips Row or any of the other major places that people already seem to know about in St. John's. But sometimes you just want a fish and chips, bring it home maybe for takeout or eat in, and And to have it in essentially my neighborhood is just convenient, and it's quality as well. As not, you don't just go here just because it's close, you go because it's pretty good. So it's nice to have this in Mount Pearl or in Paradise, or whichever community you happen to be in, to have a fish and chips restaurant. It's convenient. We always went to Chess's. It wasn't the only place that we would go, but like the go-to for us was Chess's. It's been around forever, and the Freshwater Road location is just a place of comfort for me. When I was away for a long time, with coming back to Newfoundland for visits once every 2 years or whatever, we'd always make a point to gather the whole family, cousins, aunts, uncles, and we'll have a big Chess's night. And it's good. I like the fish and chips. I love the place. I like the old side of the Freshwater Road dining room more than the new side, the Jen's Kitchen side, if it's still called Jen's Kitchen. A lot of sort of sentimental reasons drew me and my family to Chess's pretty much every time we have fish and chips. Chess's is a bit of a chain. I focus on the Freshwater Road location. They have, Topsail Road, which is actually really good as well. Mount Pearl. I just focus on the Freshwater Road location. There's on-street parking available. It's a little bit of a busy area, so there's significant amounts of on-street parking, but it can be hard to find parking right on Freshwater Road sometimes. You may find yourself parking somewhere else and walking a couple of steps, but that's just the nature of living in the city. Chafe's Landing seems to always be busy, especially in tourist season. They have parking on site right out front of the restaurant. If you're lucky enough to get in there, cool. You can never bank on that. There is another parking lot right around the corner from Chafe's. There's Chafe's, there's a house that's right there, and then right around the corner from there, there's some overflow parking. Not sure how big that lot is, but there is signage saying that there's parking available there. And then Petty Harbor is kind of known to be a little difficult for parking in peak tourism season. This is such a popular place, such a beautiful place. You need to see Petty Harbor if you're not familiar with it. But just keep in mind that parking can be an issue for Chafe's Landing. It's a beautiful place. It's in a tourist location of Petty Harbor, of course. But the feel when you walk into Chafe's is quite different than any of the other places that I've spoken about in this video. They have really nice, cozy booths downstairs, lots of wood, everything is wood around, and then upstairs they have that space for concerts and just a big space because they have to accommodate a lot of people at certain times of the year, so they built it properly. The Duke of Duckworth is a pub located in a laneway between Duckworth and Water Streets. So there's no issue with parking, but it's the St. John's Way where you want to park right outside the door, and that's not really going to happen because the place it's in a laneway. There's no road right by the door, but it is a pub. It's a different type of place. There's a lot of reasons why it's different from the other establishments that we talk about here in this video, but there's no real issue with parking. Now going inside, it's a very popular pub. Not a huge place. You can get lucky and get in and get a seat, but I can imagine it being quite full if there's any kind of event going on. I went in on a Sunday afternoon and there happened to be a soccer game going on. It was very, very busy, very full. I had a table for myself, but it was right by the door. That was really a shame. It was really busy in there. I wasn't able to take any footage from inside the place. It's really too bad because it was a pretty cool place. If you've never been to the Duke of Duckworth, it's like an old English style pub. Pretty authentic looking, so highly recommend it to go, even if you don't like fish and chips. Keith's and the Goulds is a standalone operation, so there is a parking lot there, but I will say, I went on the Friday night, and my brother told me of all the places on my list, Keith's is the place that you kind of need to prepare for because this is the place where there sometimes will be lineups. I didn't realize that at all, but it was so busy on the Friday. Keith's parking lot was double parked. It was full and double full, and then the road coming all the way down to the little turn where you go to Petty Harbor, there was cars all the way down. There's nothing else really right there. There's a little pub a little further down the road, but I can't imagine the cars that were parked there were anywhere but Keith's, so keep that in mind. There is ample parking sort of on normal business, but it's not a huge place, and the amount of overflow parking that I saw was kind of mind-blowing. I didn't realize it was that much of a staple in the Goulds, and then probably people coming from up the shore and all that. And it was a Friday night too, so I don't know if that's all the time, but it was good to see. But just be mindful of that if you're going to hit up Keith's for some fish and chips. The Big R is located in it's not an industrial area, but it's kind of nondescript. It's kind of close to the municipal depot, so not a beautiful part of town by any means, but there was no problem finding parking there the day that we went. I don't remember which day it was, but it was the restaurant was fairly busy, but it was no problem finding parking out in front of the Big R. That's located on Black Marsh Road, just off of Prince Philip Drive. I think it's Prince Philip Drive or Columbus Parkway. I'm not sure which one it is at that stretch of the road, but no real issues with parking at the Big R, even when it was moderately busy. It seemed like there's two sides of the restaurant for seating, and pretty spacious. It seemed like I can imagine it getting full, but there was really no issue with the parking or with finding a table. Scampers is kind of the same as Big R in a sense, because it's not an area that would be considered beautiful by any means. It's a busy area. It's really close to the Avalon Mall on, is that O'Leary Avenue? Yeah, it's O'Leary Avenue, sort of like on the backside of the Avalon Mall, kind of in behind Kenmount Road. So it's a very busy area, lots of traffic, lots of businesses around there, but really nothing to see. When you drive by, quite often you'll see that parking lot is full of Scampers. It's still very, very popular. Scampers was one of those places that the interior looked like maybe in 2002 it might have been in need of an upgrade, but because they never upgraded it, they can never upgrade it now. It's perfect. It's like the old style fish and chips place that had some effort put in. Now it's so dated that it's back in style again. It looks really good, so Scampers gets big points for the decor. If there's ever been in the history of Newfoundland or the history of the world an expert on French fries, on chips, it's Hutch, my buddy Hutch. So I'm gonna give the nod to Scampers as the best chips because that's what Hutch says. And I'll stand by Hutch's word when it comes to chips over anything. So there you go, Scampers. You have the best chips in a fish and chips establishment in the city of St. John's. So there was one day I took my dad out to try the ship, because a lot of the comments in some of the other fish and chips videos, a lot of people say, you gotta try the ship, you gotta try the ship. So we went to the ship, figured they'd be open for lunch, and it's a pub. They weren't open for lunch. Now, in the comments you can let me know, are they open for lunch typically or certain days? I don't know, but the day that we went, we got there probably around 1 p.m. and they were not open. So, just bad luck, poor planning, call it what you will. But of course, we were out for fish and chips. We couldn't go where we wanted to go because they weren't open. So, any excuse that we can take to head back to Leo's, we'll take. So we ended up back at Leo's. Me and Dad came out for one more fish and chips. And we meant to come down to the ship, and that was closed. So we figured we may as well head up to Leo's because we know we're going to be treated right up here. All right, so this is where we're at now. We're at Leo's instead of the ship because no places that we want to go to are ever open anymore. By the time we got there, it was a little later in the afternoon, so it was after any lunch rush, if there was one. So the owner and the owner's daughter, who is probably going to become the owner, their granddaughter and great-granddaughter of Leo himself, if I'm not mistaken, they had time to come chat with us. The younger lady, who's probably about my age, said that she recognized me from the original video, which was pretty cool. So thanks for recognizing me. Shout out to you. But I can't recommend Leo's enough. I already have high praise for them, but the way that they just sort of sat and chilled with us and talked while we ate our food, it was really cool, really cool.